ARK files for the first ETH Spot ETF in the US. New accounting rules pave the way for billions of dollars to flow into crypto, and is a new bull run forming around a demand and supply shock from the Bitcoin ETF approvals coinciding with the March 2024 Bitcoin halving. Hey everybody, welcome back to Crypto Daily. Got a bunch of news to cover today. Obviously, it's been a big couple weeks in crypto. Not a big couple weeks for the Bitcoin price though. We've been basically just bouncing around in this mid 25K range. Haven't really seen any exciting price action this week. Like literally just in this range. So nothing exciting price wise, but in terms of news, we've had a lot happen just in the past few weeks. So first piece of news, Cathie Wood, leader of ARK, filed for the first US spot ETH ETF. So obviously with all the news about the Bitcoin ETFs, it's like the whole big thing right now is will these ETFs get approved? Cathie Wood said that they want to be first to market in a lot of different ways. They're one of the first in terms of the Bitcoin ETF filing, and now they are the first ETH ETF filing. And they are in partnership with 21 Shares, which is well known in Europe. Obviously, they don't participate as much as like ARK does in the US, but cool partnership to see between the two of them. And I thought an interesting piece from this article was about these crypto critics. So let's read it. Some crypto critics have argued that spot ETFs might not see as much demand as many analysts are predicting because investors already are able to buy Bitcoin directly from exchanges, but most consumers won't want to set up separate brokerage accounts just to make one investment, says Snyder. It may be even more difficult for institutional investors who need to take into account custody and tax reporting as well, among other things. So I think this is kind of funny. I think it shows a lack of, and obviously this is like a critic of, the spot ETFs, not just the ETH one, but Bitcoin as well. I think the funny thing about this is it just shows ignorance on how the market works. So, yes, you can go out and buy Bitcoin, on Coinbase, for example. But that being said, most investors, whether it's institutions or retail, have brokerage accounts. So they don't have Coinbase accounts. Let's just face that reality. Like Coinbase is relatively new, it's relatively unknown compared to the TradFi market. But if you're able to log into your Fidelity account and just buy a Bitcoin ETF, there's going to be a lot more people that are comfortable with that, especially considering that if you own Bitcoin in like a Coinbase wallet, you have to worry about, not your keys, not your crypto, which is something we always talk about. You also have to worry about people, hacking your Coinbase account and stealing your Bitcoin. And while that might not be as big of a concern for people who are well versed in, Bitcoin and private keys and how, self custody works, for the average investor and for institutions, that is a huge concern. So they would much rather own an ETF in their Fidelity account where they already own other assets in their Fidelity account. They don't care. They don't care about self custody. They don't need to worry about it. They're not going to be worried about someone hacking into their Coinbase account or their Fidelity account to get their Bitcoin out of it. So it's a totally different ball game when you get Fidelity and these other big brokerages to offer something like an ETF in terms of like being able to just sign into your brokerage and say, hey, I want to buy this as easy as I buy a stock. It removes all the hurdles that Bitcoin currently has in terms of buying it. And that's just on the retail side. If you look at the institutional side, institutions can't really even buy Bitcoin right now. That's why they're buying MicroStrategy as a proxy to get exposure. So an ETF changes everything. So I just thought this critique was kind of funny. I don't agree with it, obviously. Long-awaited Bitcoin accounting rules to capture rises and dips. So the FASB released new rules that will take effect in 2025, but they did say that companies can start. They'll have the option to apply them early. So just, the TLDR of this is that currently companies like MicroStrategy have to mark their Bitcoin as basically equivalent to like a trademark. So if the price of Bitcoin goes down, they have to mark, they mark that as a loss. And then when the price of Bitcoin recovers, they can't mark that as a gain. So these new rules will basically allow them to mark the Bitcoin to market, and it'll be a lot more efficient for them. And obviously it'll help their reporting, their quarterly reports. So definitely cool to see. And, Michael Saylor on Twitter was saying that this will pave the way for a lot more companies to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy. So something we'd all love to see. This is from Ignace on X. So we've seen a lot of change in heart for the media around Bitcoin and crypto with all these ETF approval talks. So, we've kind of been seeing this interesting shift, and we always see it every cycle. We see that the media is very down on Bitcoin, very much like talking about countries that are banning Bitcoin, talking about scams and stuff like that. So the sentiment flip seems to be happening right now with media talking more positively about Bitcoin and crypto again. So we'll talk about this later, but it kind of coincides with like an interesting indicator of, how sentiment can lead to good investing in Bitcoin, or at least like decent timing. Pomp was on Fox Business talking about the Bitcoin ETFs and if he thinks they're going to get approved. He talked about, and I think this was the big takeaway, the demand and supply shock that's coming to Bitcoin. So in terms of demand shock, like I was saying, if a Bitcoin spot ETF or an ETH spot ETF gets approved, you're going to see a lot more investors who previously would not have touched crypto. They're going to start to own a lot of crypto. They're going to be able to trade it as easy as they trade a stock. So that's going to bring a lot of inflows into the industry. A spot ETF is a lot different than a futures ETF. We already have, futures for Bitcoin. The difference is futures are settled in cash. Spot Bitcoin futures or spot Bitcoin ETFs are settled in Bitcoin. So that's a completely different ballgame, and it will bring a lot more inflows into the industry, in my opinion. So you have that as the demand shock, and then the supply shock is obviously March 2024 is the next Bitcoin halving. I've been in this industry for almost a decade now, so I've seen a few different cycles, and obviously the Bitcoin halving cycles are a big way to make it big in this industry. So past performance doesn't always indicate future performance, but Bitcoin halvings are always bullish, at least in terms of the history of Bitcoin. So definitely cool to see this kind of coinciding with the ETFs. Riot Miner, it's called Riot Platforms, but they're basically one of the biggest Bitcoin miners, and they made a record $31 million from power credits in August. So I actually was reading through their financial reporting, and it's pretty interesting to see. They have this kind of unique power strategy that they call it, but a lot of Bitcoin miners actually do this where they buy energy. They like basically pre-buy energy so that they can get it at a cheaper rate. So you might have heard, but Texas had this huge heat wave, and Riot Platforms was able to basically take advantage of that and say, okay, we're not going to use the energy that we pre-purchased because obviously in a heat wave, people need their energy. So they let the obviously local township use all the energy, and they were able to bring in power and demand response credits. Those were worth $31.7 million in August, which surpassed the total amount of all the credits they received in 2022. So kind of an interesting strategy. It's not like a typical way you'd think of a Bitcoin miner making money. You'd think, okay, they just mine Bitcoin and make money like that. But this is really interesting. So the power sold was worth approximately 1,136 Bitcoin, and they produced 333 Bitcoin in the same month. So you can see that these power credits actually like completely flipped their revenue in terms of how it would normally come in. So definitely cool to see. I also saw in their balance sheet that they're holding like 8,000, close to 8,000 Bitcoin. So interesting to follow this. They've been making headlines recently because people talk about how BlackRock owns, a big stake in Riot through their obviously client portfolio. So this is from Dan Crypto Trades on X. Bitcoin search trends on Google are at similar levels to 2018 to 2020, when its market cap was 10 to 30% of what it is today. Buying when interest has been low and selling when interest peaks has historically been a pretty decent strategy. So like I was saying earlier, it is kind of interesting to follow sentiment and use it as somewhat of an indicator of, the cycles in crypto. Because in crypto, the cycles are super heavy. Like it's, when it's down bad. When it's up big. So definitely cool to see. And like this interest peaking out, obviously in like 2020, end of 2020, early 2021 is, when we saw Bitcoin hitting those all-time highs. So now we're kind of back to those lows in terms of interest, in terms of like Google search interest. So, if you had followed this previously and were buying when interest was low, and then selling when interest peaked, you would have done extremely well. So I wouldn't use it as like a full indicator of like, okay, if it's low, I'm just going to buy. If it's high, I'm just going to sell. But I do like to look at stuff like this just to kind of inform me, or at least keep my mind, active in crypto, because we all know what it's like to lose your mind in this industry. So last thing here, what will be the primary catalyst for the next bull market in crypto? This was just a little poll on X, but I more so just thought the question was interesting because everyone's talking about, you've obviously got the U.S. elections and all the stuff happening with regulation in the U.S. Seems to kind of have a big macro effect on the crypto industry right now. You've got the halvening coming up, and then you've also got the Spot Bitcoin ETF approvals kind of looming on the horizon. So which of these do you think is going to be the primary catalyst for the next crypto bull run? Leave a comment below. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.